Shalom, I'm Sarah Yocheved Rigler, and welcome to my channel from within the walls of Jerusalem, here in my 900-year-old house inside the walls of the old city of Jerusalem. We're very privileged today to have as our guest Catherine Peres-Shachtam. Before I bring Catherine on, I'd like to give you a little retelling of her story. I told it on, which I hope that if you haven't already read the article on Aish.com, please do. It's right there on the front page of Aish.com. But for those of you who didn't see it, I'd like to just give you a little bit of Catherine's background. It starts, as so many of our Jewish stories start in this generation, it starts with the Holocaust. Catherine's grandparents, her father's government, it was not a good time to, her grandfather was a communist, very dangerous in Franco's fascist Spain. So they decided to flee to British Mandate Palestine through North Africa. They stopped in Tunisia. Tunisia in those years was a French protectorate. And when the Germans conquered France in 1940, Tunisia came under the government of the Vichy government, which is a pro-Nazi government of France, and they built concentration camps. And Catherine's grandfather, grandmother, their children were interned in this concentration camp in Tunisia. There were no death, it wasn't a death camp. They didn't have gas chambers. They just left the Jews there to die of starvation or disease. And in fact, one of the children did die of starvation. Catherine's grandfather was a doctor, and he managed to heal one of the guards of typhoid, and the guard let them out, and that's how they were saved. But the trauma of their internment in that concentration camp, the death of their son, left generational scars, as we all know, that all great scars. And Catherine's father became a self-hating Jew. He went to France when he was 18 years old in order to go to university. He married Catherine's mother, who came from Jews who had lived in the south of France for generations. They were secular Jews. Her mother died when Catherine was 11 years old. And she was left with this self-hating Jewish father. She had no Jewish background whatsoever in terms of anything that we associate with Judaism. Her father remarried again soon after her mother's death, and they had no really place for Catherine in their lives. She was shipped off to an elite boarding school. At the age of 18, she moved to the UK for university. She met a handsome Muslim man, and at the age of 18, she married him. He said, "You have to convert to Islam." That was okay for her. She had no idea what that meant. Her husband, who was from Yemen, was a Sunni Muslim. Catherine was not at all drawn to Sunni Islam, but she was drawn to Shia Islam. She had two children, a son and a daughter, and then the family moved to Yemen. Meanwhile, Catherine had gotten 2 master's degrees. She had become an economist, a journalist, a political analyst. She became a consultant for the United Nations Security Council on Yemen, and she was writing articles. After 4 years, they went back to England. The marriage had been an emotionally abusive marriage. Catherine wanted and got a divorce. And at that point, soon after that, Iran started noticing this very devout Shia Muslim that Catherine had sincerely become, and she was invited to Iran for the first time in 2015. There were multiple trips to Iran as a guest of the regime. She became a favorite on Iranian television, spouting the the viewpoints of the regime, especially a lot of anti-Israel stuff, vehemently anti-Israel. But something happened while she was in Iran, which is that the mullahs and the heads of the government and these high up, supposedly very religious leaders propositioned her. And she was very disillusioned by the hypocrisy. She went back to England, and at some point decided she just couldn't do it anymore, that it was too much of a gap between the ideals she had seen in Shia Islam and what she was seeing in the men who supposedly embodied it. And she took off her hijab, and that did not go over well with the Iranian regime. You cannot appear on Iranian television without your hijab, but she absolutely refused to put it back on. And they started to disassociate themselves from her. And she was kind of left floating. Like, who was she at this point? And a couple of years later, in 2019, her daughter, Rian, insisted she watch a YouTube video about Israel by Rudy Rochman, who's a Zionist activist. And Catherine watched it, and it was like the blinders fell off, and she, for the first time, really saw things from the Israeli point of view. Like the time had come, and she started watching more videos, and she really realized that she had been, what she says, 100% wrong about Israel. And in 2021, she started writing for the Times of Israel. And she came out as a Jew and as a Zionist, made a big hairpin turn in her life. And at that point, when the Iranians, took them 3 months to really notice, I guess they don't read the Times of Israel regularly, but when they did notice, they really just denounced her, said she had all along been a spy of the Mossad, which was, of course, ridiculous. She wasn't. And they denounced her, took down all her articles and her television appearances, and really lambasted her. And Catherine, at this point, now that she's come out as a Jew and as a Zionist, said to me, and I have it in that article on Aish.com, that she, for the first time in her life, she knows who she is. So with that, I'd like to welcome Catherine Perez Shakdam onto our screen. Shalom, Catherine. Catherine, happy to have you with us. It's a real privilege, Catherine.
No, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you for inviting me.
So my first question is, I'm going to quote you, what you said to me. You said, from that point on, I promised myself, once you saw these videos that revealed to you the Israeli side of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, you said, from that point on, I promised myself that I would do everything I could to atone, because I really felt guilt. I was 100% wrong. And I really feel it's important for me to come clean and to tell people. I'm not proud of what I've done. You said to me, I wrote it up. But I want people to know that it's okay to change your mind, to mess up, as long as you're responsible enough to own up to your mistakes and say, from now on, I will do better. Well, this absolutely, when I read your words in the Times of Israel, I was 100% wrong. And I thought, wow, where do you get the courage to say you're 100% wrong? I mean, our ego always tries to justify the actions and say, well, I was partly wrong, I was 60% wrong, but how were you able to overcome your ego enough to say I was 100% wrong?
I don't think it's courage, Sarah. I think that it's just, look, I'm a mother of two, and I'm trying to do the best I can to raise my children with integrity. And that means that I have to demand that of myself, first and foremost. And I don't, for so many years, I've lived other people's lives, and I've lived through their lens and through the narrative that they wanted, me to carry, or live through the identity that they've given me, that I really wanted to, to live for myself and actually be true to myself. And sometimes that means that you have to, to look in the mirror, and, a lot of the time you don't like what you see, but you have to be honest with what is it that you see if you want to do better and change it. And I just decided that I really wanted, for the first time in my life, to be really honest, about what is it that I've done, why I've done it. And I'm not trying to be apologetic. I just really wanted to own my mistake, because I felt that it was necessary for me to be able to shed, everything that happened before, and for me to kind of be reborn as me, as truly me. And you can't do it halfway. You have to, you really have to look at yourself and recognize that, look, everything that I've done, whether it was, because of my environment or the thing that, I was told, it was still me. I still chose to do those things and to believe those lies that they fed me. But, I bear the responsibility. I can't run away from this. And unless I face this, there's no way that I could actually do better and truly atone for my sin. And I think that I think it's not bravery, but bold enough to say, well, yes, I'm imperfect. Yes, I messed up. Where do I go from here? You have to embrace, all the wrong that you've done in order to move away from it. And I don't want to repeat it. And I think that if I was to just to leave it, if I was to try to rationalize what I've done and to find, apologies, then I think I will be bound to repeat, the same mistakes again and again, because sometimes you just need to let some light to come onto it and just say, well, there you go. This is the whole imperfection of me. How do I move away from this?
Yes, exactly. I mean, in the month before Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, when all Jews are supposed to be doing tshuva, which means like admitting our sins and trying to do better, that's exactly the process we have to go through. I mean, you really hit the nail on the head there. I'd like to know, you said that, your daughter kind of forced you to watch that Rudy Rochman YouTube video. What did he say in that video that made you suddenly see the Israeli side in a new light?
Do you know, it's not so much what he said, because I thought about it because we had that conversation. I think it's just the way that he comes across. He's a really proud, but there's no arrogance. He's a really proud Jew. And he's so comfortable in his own skin. He's so unapologetic, of his identity. It just literally oozes out of him, this confidence and pride in his identity. But he doesn't do it in a way that negates other people's identity, which I think is a strength that very few people have. A lot of the time, people exist in opposition to others or in rejections of others to justify their own. But Rudy had literally none of this. And he was so honest and authentic about the message, that he was trying to convey. It wasn't about apologizing for being a Jew and an Israeli. He wasn't trying to kind of wash away, some of the mistake that, Israel may have done in the past, for whatever reasons. It was truly a message of, saying, this is who I am. This is my definition of Zionism. And I really liked his definition Zionism, because it kind of echoed with something that rang true to me, in that it wasn't a political statement, it wasn't a religious statement, it was beyond that, and it was truly about what does it mean to be Jewish today, and actually have a land to call our own, and feel and have borders that we could feel safe within, because it is our birthright. And just the fact that he related it back to our birthright and that promise that was made to us changed everything for me, because he went beyond the political and the religious at that point, and it was about something else. As a community, this is ours to defend, but we don't have to do it in rejection of other people. But it's also, for me, it was an affirmation that the Jewish identity kind of lies beyond the narrative that we see play out in the media. Which is very reductive. I think it just reduces us to, this just like reserve of land, and it's like we way beyond this. I don't know. It just, for me, it just literally I think it woke up something inside of me. I don't know what it was that I was yearning for, and I think I was waiting for someone to put words onto it, and he did.
I think it woke up your Jewish soul.
I think he did. I think it truly did, because it was literally a blink of an eye, and it was just, I was thinking like, wow. I don't know. Again, it's not. Maybe it's not just what he said or how he said it. It's just something clicked, and I think I was just ready. I think I went through like a whole process of kind of trying, other people's skin almost, and then nothing was fitting until I actually, I mean, I had one that was given to me already. I had an identity. I just never embraced it, and the second I did, even for half a second, then I felt home. I just, everything changed from then on, because I felt a lot more. I felt braver. I felt less aggressive towards people, in that I was very confident about who I was. My whole demeanor changed. Everything changed for me. Even if you look at my interviews on TV, I used to be quite aggressive and very sarcastic and very belligerent in the way that I was talking to people. That has changed completely, because I'm not coming from a place of anger or fear, or, and not trying to justify myself to people. I'm just me. And if people accept it, great. If they don't, I'm not overly bothered by it.
Beautiful. Wow. Wow. That so interesting. So interesting how when we change our identity, we change our whole demeanor. That's so interesting to me.
Well, I
Uh,
think this is what has been happening to the Jewish community, I think, across the ages, honestly, where people have systematically tried to tell us who we are, as opposed to, accept what we're telling them, who we're telling them we are. And this is something that that I found even today. This is what is happening to us, where we have people, telling us what we should be, or what they think we are, or who we ought to be in order to blend in. And I think our mistake has been to actually somewhat accept it. I mean, I don't know if you recall the conversation that Whoopi Goldberg was having on TV about, the Jewish identity. She was saying that, the white people, again, is a typical example of how people think they can project labels onto us without actually asking us, because, I mean, we're the
yes.
best people to tell the world who we are, but they never listen to us and they argue. And for some reason, we take it, which I found quite strange.
Well, that was my next question is, as far as is about self-hating Jews, there are so many Jews who support the boycott and divestment and sanction movement and other anti-Israel movements, imposing this absurd double standard on Israel. I mean, like it's. I try to be I try to be tolerant of people, but I cannot tolerate Jews who say things that are blatant lies, that they're anti-Israel. One of our listeners is asking, "What is a self-hating Jew?" And you used this term a lot when I interviewed you for my Aish.com article. You identified your father as a self-hating
Mm.
Jew, and and I'd like to hear from you. How do you define a self-hating Jew, and what do you think creates a self-hating Jew?
I think a desire, for, this feeling that you get when society, I mean, especially in France, for my dad, France was always quite anti-Semitic. Even after the World War II, it was not like the Jewish community was not particularly welcome or tolerated. So there was a lot of pushback, a lot of bias and prejudices towards the Jewish community. And for my dad, he tried everything he could, to fix his accent, and to, behave, like a proper French person, in that even the curriculum that he followed at university, he really wanted to blend in and to disappear, his ethnic identity and religious identity, to the point where it wasn't there anymore for anyone to pick at. And he had a great shame about his heritage, to the point where he did not like to discuss it ever. So he did not like to, sometimes people, when you have friends over, they tend to discuss, family ties or things that happened to their grandparents or great grandparents. With my father, those subjects were just, taboo. You could not talk about it. He never told me stories about, my grandparents, or, like things that happened, before he was born, so that I could kind of share in my heritage. It was never discussed. There was a willingness to cut ties completely, not just with the community, but himself and his family tree, because he couldn't bear the shame of that identity. And I think that in France, you had to almost apologize for being Jewish or even having a Jewish heritage. in order to be invited into society and be tolerated as one of them. And for me, that was that. I think it was passed on because I think I was, I mean, the environment I was in because of my father. It was just, I think he passed it on to me, and I was fed that kind of self-hatred without me knowing about it because it's very insidious. And I think a lot of people, I mean, especially those who are, as I did, really vehemently opposed to Israel without really understanding what that means, by the way, or trying again to apologize for other people's prejudices because so often you hear, oh, but the Jews controls social media, the Jews control the banking system, the Jews do this and the Jews do that, and then people will push back and say, oh, but I may be Jewish, but I'm not one of them, and I look, I'm going to support you in your hatred of my people so that maybe you would accept me. And I think it comes from this place of fear, rather than actually have learned the lesson of World War II, is that you don't fight hatred by trying to apologize who you are. It's actually, I think you should do the opposite. You should stand strong in your identity, but invite people to to have a discourse with you, and to try to be welcoming and I would say compassionate, but not to the point where you would put yourself in danger. I think that we need to stop trying to play into this bullying narrative by trying to be like, so very kind and so very polite and so very quiet. I think that we don't have to be aggressive, but at the same time, we should not tolerate it. And I think that we need to regain control of the narrative in that we need to be telling people who we are and not allow other people to tell us who we are or what it means to be a Jew. And you don't have to hate your own people in order to exist. You don't have to deny who you are in order for other people to accept you. It's the very definition of toxicity and abuse. And you can't live like that. I tried. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. And it only leads to a lot of trauma and wasted life, really.
One of our listeners is saying, I feel really bad for your dad. He must have been so scared. So it seems like you're also saying that this syndrome of being the self-hating Jew comes from fear that other people will dissociate from you or want to or hate you, and if you want to be accepted, you just have to join their anti-Semitic club.
Yeah, but they do. This is the problem too. We have also to recognize that it happens. The second you come out as a proud Jew and a Zionist, there's a pushback. You need to be prepared for this, and sometimes people have difficulty doing this because it's not easy to be rejected. I mean, look, it happened to my daughter because when at school she went and she has a Star of David around her neck. And we had that conversation where I was telling her, look, you're going to, what happened to me when I was a child will happen to you, is that people will push back against it. And you're going to have, people's eyes will roll and people will make certain comments to you because, now you are wearing your identity around your neck. And she had the eye rolls and she had people, coming to her and trying to challenge her on, Palestine and holding her responsible for Israel policies, for example. Now my daughter is not me, and she actually, she's 17, but she's a lot more courageous than I ever was at her age. And she took them on. She took on her professor, one of her teachers. She literally took on her history teacher, who was, very pro-Palestinian and was actually bringing his own narrative into the classroom. And my daughter, who's literally like, there's only one other Jew with her in school. She stood against her entire classroom to tell everybody, let me tell you about my people, and none of you have a right to talk because I am, this is something that is happening to my people, and you guys don't have the right to actually have an opinion, because you don't have a horse in that race. And I thought that was so brave of her to do that and to stand up to a teacher.
Wow.
And she actually taught them about, because they had the slogan from the river to the sea. And my daughter gave her history teacher a history lesson, and that she explained to him what that meant, and that it wasn't a cry for liberation, but a call for genocide on the Jewish people. And she told him that if he, as a teacher, if he was peddling that kind of radical narrative, that made him a supporter of terrorism, which is illegal in the UK. My 17-year-old daughter had, actually she was 16 at the time, had the courage to say something like that to her teacher, knowing that she could get expelled, but she didn't care.
So
So you
you
see,
said,
when you push back without being aggressive, but actually standing in your own truth and educating people, things happen. Positive things happen, but it takes courage. It's not easy because a lot of the time we're a minority. So that means that we're alone sometimes in a room full of people. But there's something very powerful when you're coming from a place of knowledge, and standing strong in your identity, knowing that you have millions of people behind you, even though they're not in the room with you, but you're not alone. It changes dynamics, and people, even if they don't agree with you, they can't bully you anymore because you're not giving them any grip. And if they know that they can't scare you into silence or push you against the wall, they're just gonna let go, and they're gonna give you the space in which you can exist. And I know this because I've seen it. We allowing fear to kind of like, look, it's if you have a candle and you allow the window to be open, the candle will blow. But if you close the window onto yourself and say, well, no, the wind will not come in because I will not allow it, then nothing can just snuff it out. And this
yes,
is what we need to understand.
yes,
We
yes.
need to close the window and say, no, you don't. I mean, you could say whatever you want to say, but I'm not going to let that pollute my identity. I'm going to stand strong in who I am, and I'm going to tell you who I am, and then you can accept it or not, but it's not going to change me.
Wow. Your daughter has said that she would like to serve in the Israeli army. How do you feel
She
about
does.
that?
Look, I'm not going to lie. I mean, it's not like I didn't jump from joy at the idea of my daughter putting herself in harm's way potentially. At the same time, I'm going to support her because that's what she wants to do. And if she feels strongly about something, that's my job as her mother to do everything I can to make that happen for her. I'm proud of her. If that's what she feels she needs to do, then I want her to do it. I want her to do whatever she feels is necessary in order to to be true to herself and live her life the way she wants. It's
One of
not
our
really for me to like or not like. I'm just her mom. I'm not there to judge her or make her do anything. I just want to support her.
One of our listeners is writing, I love hearing stories of the next generation having such deep faith and strength. Your daughter is awesome. I agree.
Oh, thank you, Amy.
Awesome.
I think so too. I think my daughter is she's great. I love her.
So
Oh, thank you, Avril.
next thing I want to ask you, Catherine, is you've had such a interesting life journey.
Hello.
What life lessons did you learn in your life journey so far? You have a long life ahead of you, but what life lessons have you learned that you can share with our readers, our listeners?
You have to stay true to yourself because people will try to turn you into so many different things. And there is no way that you can please people. I've learned that giving up or not believing in yourself is a grave mistake, because we tend to think that it's easier to just kind of give in and let people, tell us who we are, what to do, how to do it, because you're going to have a quiet life, or, that it's just going to make things go away, that people won't challenge you anymore, bully you or try to make you do things. It doesn't work that way. We have to do the work on ourselves and actually, I think, accept exactly who we are and understand that. I don't want to sound arrogant, but I think that is there's something that is, I think the Jewish people in general collectively need to understand, is that the reason why people hate us so much and have done so for generations and generations and generations is because we have a gift. We, I think, hold a mirror that they don't like the reflection that they see in that mirror.
Yes.
And the reason for that is not we're not special in the sense that we are better than people. I came to understand that we have a greater responsibility to the rest of the world to lead by example. We have a light that they do not like. We chose that responsibility, by the way. So it's not like, we were given a choice and we chose. Um, and I think that this is what is we need to embrace this as opposed to try to apologize for it or misuse it. And I think that once we do that, things will get a lot better. Because exception is happening for me, and I'm far from perfect, and I've done things I'm not proud of. But at the same time, I've never been more at peace in the middle of a storm, because people are coming at me right, left, and center, saying things about me that I'm aspiring with this and with that. People, I mean, I have literally a government in Iran that would like to see me gone, because I disturb them. But I never felt more at peace, more in control of my life, and I'm happy. I'm happy because I feel like for the first time in my life, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. And I know now that my mistakes were mistakes, but not mistakes for nothing. Because the whole path was actually, there was a reason for it. So there was a hand behind it. And that as long as you embrace your mistake and recognize that you're not perfect, then things start to fall into place. So a lot of the time we are on the worst enemy. We keep complaining about things happening to us and why this and why that. There's a plan for everything. We just need to trust in it, and trust in yourself that you can actually make it. And don't live in a life of in fear. I think for me is this. Okay, the one lesson is don't live in fear. Just embrace yourself.
When you say there was a hand behind your very circuitous life, and there was a reason, what do you think is the reason that you were literally cast into this very, very anti-Jewish and anti-Israel regime? Why do you think that it was God's will for you to go through that?
Maybe a lesson, maybe a bridge, maybe I'm not sure yet, because I mean I haven't arrived yet. But I think it's look, I think there's a lot of irony in the fact that a Jewish woman. I mean, the government in Iran hate women and hate the Jews. So a Jewish woman to go into Iran, to be allowed into like the government kind of circle, to interview the now president, who's by the way one of the most anti-Semitic person in Iran. I think there's a humbling story behind it. It's like sometimes our fall can come by those very people we hate the most. That hatred for the sake of hatred is ridiculous. And maybe to become some kind of maybe spokesperson, to try to just act as a bridge in between, like anti-Semitism and the Jewish people. And I don't know yet. I know what I want to do. I want to make sure that I want to be a cautionary tale of what not to do. I don't want anyone else to go through what I went through, and just live a life of self-hatred. I just want people to just to be proud of who they are. And maybe the world to look at us a bit differently, to try to understand more where we come from exactly. Because I know that we talk a lot about the Holocaust and the trauma that we endured, but I don't think that people understand what that trauma means, generation after generation, because I do believe that we inherit the trauma of our forefathers. There's a line there. There's a continuity that we need to unpack, and we haven't done that work yet. And I think that we need, as a community, to kind of exercise that trauma, and turn it into a positive light. So if I can help do that in some very small, way, I think that would be enough. But as to what that hand, has in store for me, I don't know. We'll see. I have no idea.
I read the comments for one of your Times of Israel blogs. You referred to the Iranian regime as being anti-Semitic, hating Jews. And you had a slew of comments by Iranians saying, no, we're not, we're anti-Israel, but we're not anti-Jewish. And the example is that we have Jews living right here in Iran and we treat them very well. I mean, you had access to really the inner chambers of the Iranian regime. So you are qualified to really tell the truth. Is the Iranian regime just anti-Israel? Do they just hate Israel, or do they hate all of us Jews?
No, they hate the Jews. They hate the Jews, and that was actually said to me very, very clearly. I mean, like, they have ridiculous tales in terms of, why. I mean, according to them, God hated the Jews so much that, this is why the Holocaust happened. But at the same time, they deny that the Holocaust happened. So it's quite strange. I mean, they're not very intellectually, like, there's no integrity in what is it that they say. It's hatred for the sake of hatred. But I realized once, because I was having a conversation with a cleric, because he was profoundly. I mean, he kept telling me all the way that the Jews had messed up in the Quran, and why bad things kept happening to them. And I've asked him the question. I was like, but I said, in your book, I mean, except for one of your prophets, Muhammad, all your prophets are Jews. So how can you rationalize your hatred of the Jews? But they can somehow. And then he told me something that kind of clicked, is that, he told me that the name Israel is not just for the country, it's the people of Jacob, it's all of us. It's the people of Jacob that they hate, and they want us gone, all of us. It's not just Israel that they have a problem with. And by the way, they don't have technically a problem with Israel. It's just because, Iran understood very early on that if they wanted to have any kind of political longevity, they had to kind of offer some kind of a hand to the Sunni Islamic world, because they were very isolated, politically speaking. And so they decided to kind of took on the flag of Palestine, which is mainly Sunni, in order to kind of build this political bridge. So it wasn't because they cared very much for, the cause of the Palestinians, or even understood it. It was more kind of a rallying cry to say, hey, Sunni world, you don't like us as Shia because we're a minority, but look, we want to defend you and represent you against the enemy. And it was convenient for them because they hated the Jews anyway. So they're like, oh, we could get against, we could get onto that train and, hate Israel, and then, project anti-Semitism by saying that, oh, we criticizing a country as opposed to a people. Because after World War II, you can't exactly peddle, anti-Semitism in the way that they wanted to express it. So you had to cover it up with something. And, Israel was a convenient kind of cover. But no, look, Jews in Iran are not mistreated and then not being slaughtered, okay? But this is our problem, is that as long as we're not being slaughtered, we think that it's okay, they are tolerating the Jews. No. As long as there's a difference is being made on the basis of your Jewishness, and that you don't have access to all the rights that other citizens have, for me this is oppression. So there's no gas chambers in Iran, but it's they might as well, because Jews are being so oppressed, and it has been so normalized in society that they don't even rebel against it, and they make do with the little bit that the state has given them. But they have lists. So every single Jew in Iran is on a list, on a government list, at any time, and any time of day, or whenever the government feels that they want to, you could get arrested. You could be thrown in jail. You could be executed. You could, so many things could happen. And people live in that fear. They don't have access to university the same way that other people do. They don't have access to government job because a Jew cannot be trusted. There's so many things that they cannot do, and they're forced to live, in isolation. So a society within society, without any rights. So they can get arrested if they travel from one city to the next. So technically speaking, they have free movement. But technically speaking, they could get arrested just for breathing and existing. Because people could argue, why are you traveling? Why are you doing this? Are you being a spy? Because in Iran, if you're a Jew, you are a Mossad agent. That's what the government believes. They have this propaganda in Iran whereby they're telling their population that any Jewish person holding a business is basically using this money, so the money that they generate from the business, to send to Israel to then help kill, Palestinian babies. This is what they tell them. So Jewish businesses are boycotted. So that reminds me of, the 1930s Germany.
Yes.
There's so many things that we don't talk about. And because, you have one Jewish representative in parliament. And so therefore they tell the world, look at us with being very tolerant. And every year they invite members of the Natural Charter, to pose as the friendly Jews, and so that the government could justify that, oh, look, we're not being anti-Semitic, are we? Because we're tolerating those people. Now, those people are the very definition of self-hating Jews.
Yes. Yes. Catherine, I want to read you comment from one of our listeners. She says, Catherine, you are brave to keep your name and come out as you have done. Are you being harassed in any way?
Well, I'm being bullied online, I know, a lot, but I don't really care, if I'm honest with you. I think I had training with my ex-husband in terms of being bullied for being Jewish. So it's like, whatever it is that they can say or do, it happened already. So I don't really let it faze me. I mean, I've done interviews and podcasts, with Iranian media, because, people were curious about, my story, just as you are. And I was reading the comments online, and it's basically like you have all the government, trolls coming out and, calling me all kinds of names under the sun. But again, it doesn't really bother me. I know who I am, so they can say whatever they want. It doesn't change anything. And again, I refuse to live in fear. So I'm going to say, yeah, it hasn't been easy. It's very stressful, but at the same time, it just proves to me that I really kind of hit a nerve with them. And I think that if they are reacting so violently towards me, it's because they're very scared of what I have to say in terms of what my message could carry, because it's impossible for them to deny what I'm saying because I've seen it from so close. I know what I'm talking about. And they don't have any, they can't reject what I'm saying because they know it to be true. And it's going to be very difficult for them to try to rationalize a lie around what it is that I'm going to say and will continue to say.
Wow. You have gone public defining yourself as a Jew and a Zionist. You told me how your former in-laws used to throw up to you that you're a Jew, even though you were practicing Islam, that whenever there was something, when you were living with them in Yemen, every time there was something on the television about Israel, they would say, your people did this and your people did that. So they obviously considered, you were practicing Islam, but they considered that being a Jew obviously was a racial identity that you carried with you and you could not erase. So now when you publicly identify as a Jew, apparently, of course, it means more to you than just a racial identity. What does it mean to you to be a Jew at this point in your life?
Do you know what? I don't know if I have the full answer to that. It's just I know that this is. I'm Jewish on a cellular level, so it's not something. It's not something you can reject or deny or not be without being, at war with yourself. And I just learned that it is. Do you know my grandfather used to have this saying? He was secular, but he was really, really proud Zionist. And he used to tell me, and I think I understand it now, that being Jewish goes beyond Judaism, and it goes beyond just an ethnic identity in the sense that it is who you are at you most, I would say, cellular level, in that it's everything that you are, but you're going to have to learn how to define that for yourself, and that you cannot reject it. It will, he used to tell me that, you one day you'll understand what it means to be Jewish. But he told me, like, maybe not yet, but one day you will wake up and you'll understand what is it I'm trying to tell you. And I think I did, but I don't know how to express it just yet, if that makes sense. Yeah.
He was the grandfather who gave you, when you were born, the Hebrew name Esther.
Yeah. Who knew? I mean, look, it's just, I don't know, but it's just, yeah. When I think about it, it's quite funny. I don't know if the Iranians, read that story or know about that story, but yeah, I think that would make them mad.
You became disillusioned with Shia Islam because the Iranian leaders, who were all very religious Muslims, propositioned you.
Mm-hmm.
In the Jewish world, we have had scandals, thankfully not among our leaders, but among lower level, supposedly religious men. And I remember a rabbi saying to me when I became religiously observant 37 years ago, he said to me, "Don't judge Judaism by the Jews." What if in the Jewish world you encounter people who claim to be religious, but who
Mm.
are dishonest, corrupt? How will that affect your rapprochement with Judaism?
I would say it's very different because with me about Shia Islam, what it was is I realized that in the behavior of the cleric, it wasn't just them kind of violating some of the principles of Shia Islam, or basically being hypocritical about what it is that they were saying and not doing what it is what they were saying. I realized that there's actually, and I know I'm going to get a lot of hate for saying this, and it might not come across as very tolerant, but bear with me, is that I came to understand that the very nature of Islam is actually quite violent, quite aggressive, very belligerent, and profoundly unjust, even though it's claiming all the opposite of what I just said. And I think that because of the nature of that religion and how it's been projected and how it was born and how it was spread in colonialism, through means of violence, I think that those clerics have actually have internalized that violence, and now projected or acting it out onto, and that means that, they're doing things that they shouldn't be doing. With Judaism, I think it's very different because Judaism at its core, and I don't understand it fully. I would not even pretend that I'm educated enough in Judaism to know what I'm talking about. However, what I feel is that Judaism is a lot more spiritual, in terms of trying to call people to better themselves and to elevate their soul towards the divine, so aspiring to ideals, and that the practice of Judaism is just there to act as a platform, to allow yourself to kind of free yourself from this world and to aspire to the divine. With Islam, it's very different. It's actually locking. It's demanding on people to follow certain rules and rituals in order to lock them in to a system of control. It's not about liberation. So the kind of wake-up call that I had because of their behavior went beyond just, obviously you don't judge a religion on its people. Of course not, because, you have bad people everywhere. But at the same time, it kind of forced me to look at Shia Islam and understand what I just said. So for me, it was a more profound kind of disgust of what is it that Islam was claiming to be and what it was really in its nature. And I know that saying this, a lot of people will start screaming and say, I'm being Islamophobic. I'm not. But if you look at the history of Islam, how it was created, how it was projected, how it was taught, how it spread, it is a cult of war. It is imperialism through the control of people by claiming God. It's not about liberation. And Judaism, for me, at its essence, is about the liberation of people.
Yeah, so I spent time in India, as you know, and when there's 5, like things that Muslims have to do, like fast during Ramadan, pray 5 times a day. One of their things is jihad, holy war. So I mean, it really is built into the religion, holy war. And in India, they conquered northern India a few hundred years ago when they were, as they conquered. The Arabs conquered the land of Israel in the 7th century. And
it's the colonial religion.
See all the beautiful temples and statuary that were like defaced because Islam came in a very violent way.
And it's a very intolerant religion. Although, it's quite interesting because it keeps actually in the Quran, God is actually urging them to respect the people of the book. That means us, by the way, the Jews and the Christian. But they don't do that. They don't do that because they have, they understand that their sole purpose is to spread, and in order to spread, they are willing to destroy, as opposed to invite. And it's a very, it's, you know, I think the problem that we have today is that because there's so much politics around, you know, Islam, that it's almost impossible for us to actually challenge them on what it is that they're saying and what is the book is saying, essentially. Because they keep saying, you know, my religion, this is the word of God. And because it is a holy book, we basically are not allowed to challenge it. But I think that we need to read the words and actually challenge, because there's something that is profoundly, you know, insidious and nefarious about, you know, what it is that they're saying. And we have to be responsible enough. And I think that we have that responsibility to actually challenge them and say that, you know, you can't hide behind the word of God and actually claim, you know, and claim the devil. You can't do that. And someone has to tell them. And I think that ultimately, if you look at the way that Israel and the Jews have come up against the Islamic world, I think that the writing is on the wall, quite clearly telling us that maybe we ought to do that. Maybe we can do that.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's quite a challenge for us.
But then again, we don't really have a choice. I mean, if you look at Israel and exactly like where we are at, I mean, geographically, we're surrounded by Islamic countries, and I think that if we forget politics for just a second, and actually try to see that maybe like someone is trying to tell us something, maybe we're fighting the wrong war, in the sense that it's Islam is about ideology, so all the politics of the Arab world are basically stemming from that ideology. So if you go after the ideology and actually try to challenge it, and I'm not saying violently, but like have some kind of clash of civilization in terms of ideas and ethical principles, and actually to try to tell them, like, can you please hear yourself? Do you hear what is it that you're saying? Do you understand what you built your life around, the principles that you're preaching and teaching your children? That martyrdom is actually like desirable. That, for a mother to lose a child is actually allowing her to have a higher status in society, because her son is a martyr or her daughter is a martyr because they've blown themselves up or they've done whatever. Yes. There's something very wrong about that. But because we're not allowed to challenge it, because it's politically incorrect, and we get shut down. But I'm looking at the way that Israel, for decades have fought against that. Maybe because someone is actually forcing us to say, hey, this is kind of your job. You need to shine a light onto this and actually challenge it. And the reason why things keep happening to you is because you're refusing to take on that mantle and to actually, like, carry out your responsibility.
Well,
maybe.
Well, maybe. It's something for us really to think about. You're giving us a great deal to think about, Catherine. My last question is, you have said that Shia Islam is a form of spiritual colonialism. They try to disappear people's identity. Mm-hmm. So as a Baalas Teshuva myself, I'm a Baalas Teshuva, someone who became religiously observant as an adult. I took on a new lifestyle and a new dress code, but I don't feel that my identity was violated in any way. What do you mean that Shia Islam, as practiced in Iran, tries to disappear people's identity?
Okay. So again, I'm going back to this form of colonialism. So, Iran has, whenever people convert to Shia Islam, what is asked of them is not what you did, which is to basically take on a new lifestyle of you choosing, of your own volition, to aspire to greater ideals. It has to do with disappearing who you are. And I mean, in terms of very clear terms, the way you speak, the way you eat, the way you dress, the way that even the language that you use in terms of the expressions that you use, they're asking you to become Iranian. Not just a Shia Muslim, an Iranian Shia Muslim. So you have to disappear everything that you are in terms of your national identity and the culture that you were brought into, to become more Iranians than Iranians. And you have to walk the way they walk and talk the way they talk, believe what they believe, practice the way they believe, and everything else in between. And that means that you're not allowed to be who you were born to be. In the Jewish community, we have, Jews from Nigeria, Jews from Ethiopia. We have Jews from all over the place. Yes. And they're part of, the Jewish world. So
Yes.
we are many nations within one nation, and no one is ever asked to be disappeared. They actually come to enrich the greater whole. So every every tradition, every little idiosyncrasy is actually precious because it's a reflection of the multiculturalism and the beauty of the Jewish people. We are one but many, and this is celebrated. In Iran, it's not. In Shia Islam, a lot of the time they're asking you to slap. It's almost like you're gaining in your passport, and then you have to disappear your culture. You have to deny whoever you were before to become this brand new person, and you're not allowed to be who you are. It's not like there's no addition. It's not like now you're becoming religious and you're doing new things. No, you have to first disappear yourself completely, and then they're going to tell you who you need to be. So there's no choice, and there's no respect to your individuality. They're not telling you that you have something to add to the conversation or that you're valuable because you're bringing experience with you. No, they want to tell you like, no, now it's going to be like, we're going to erase everything that you were before, and we're going to tell you exactly who you need to be. For me, that's not freedom. That's the very definition of oppression.
Yes, yes. We're going to end with a question from one of our listeners. She's asking, what is your take on Israel's new coalition with the UAE, Egypt, and possibly Saudi Arabia, if that happens? What do you think about the Abrahamic Accords? And is there another form of Islam which is tolerant toward others, referring to the United Arab Emirates?
I'm going to disappoint you. I'm not a big fan of Islam. I think like we're trying to find moderation when moderation doesn't exist. And I think that, Sam Harris said it really, really well when he was saying that moderate Islam doesn't exist.
Who are you quoting?
I'm sorry? Sam Harris. Sam Harris is a very well-known atheist, and he's done many debates about Islam. And he said quite clearly, and I agree with him, there's no such thing as moderate Islam. We keep telling ourselves that it exists because it helps us sleep at night, and we don't want to understand that the likes of Al Qaeda, ISIS, and the Taliban, everything that they do, they did not invent it. It's in the book. They're following the book. If anything, they're the real Muslims. It's quite scary. So we're trying to rationalize and say, no, but they're not that bad. Well, if you believe that they believe that everything in the Quran is the word of God, should they choose one day to act on it, we would have a massive problem. So we need to come to terms with that and just stop tiptoeing around the issue. This is the reality we're in today. Now, can we and should we normalize, ties with other countries in the Middle East? Absolutely. I think it's necessary. And I think that only by, allowing other countries in the region to come to terms with the reality of Israel and the Jewish people, would they actually see that there's no devils, that we don't have horns and a tail, and that we don't eat our children's blood, then maybe things will change. But we need to be careful, to make a difference in between advancement of our politics and foreign affairs, and try to build ties and the nature of the religion that continue to fuel and feed terrorism, because this is not going away until we address it. So I think we need to have some kind of we need to work parallel to what we're doing. What Israel is doing is great, and I think it's necessary, but at the same time I think Israel really needs to address the core issue of Islamic radicalism. And actually maybe challenge, those governments like Saudi Arabia, and say that, maybe radicalism is not so much like a minority thing, but more like the main narrative coming out of the book, and that maybe, I don't know, maybe they ought to rewrite it a little bit.
I being Jewish, I have chutzpah, so I'm going to say. As a representative of the entire Jewish people, I am very, very happy to have you home, back with us, and I look forward to following your journey forward as you continue to grow and to express, both, with your brilliant mind and your beautiful, loving heart, exactly all the things that you see and can share with us. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you so much. Thank you for everyone for listening, and thank you for being so kind to me. Really appreciate it.